The thing you are chasing isn't the problem. The way you cling to it, that's where the trap lies. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What he meant was that obsession blinds you, and the harder you stare, the less you see. Ironically, it is when you release the desperate grip that you begin to embody the version of yourself who already holds what you desire. This is not another cliché about detachment or a shallow manifest your dreams slogan. This is about psychological transformation. And if you stay with me not just for a moment but through the full journey, you'll uncover a truth people spend entire lives chasing but rarely grasp. The truth that the void you are so desperate to fill was never empty to begin with. Once you see this, you will never chase in the same way again. So let's begin here. Why do you want it so badly? Most people stop at the first answer. They assume it's obvious. I want love because I'm tired of being alone. I want success so I can take care of my family. I want peace because I am always anxious. But Jung would invite you to go deeper. The conscious mind explains with logic, but the unconscious speaks in symbols, in repetition, in pain. You don't really want love. You want safety and connection. You don't really want success. You want to silence the voice that told you long ago you were never enough. You don't simply want peace. You want freedom from the war inside your own mind. The less aware you are of these deeper motives, the harder you chase shallow solutions. You find someone yet still feel lonely. You hit a goal but end up more lost. You try to rest only for your thoughts to grow louder. Because the chase was never about the thing. It was about identity. It was about the unconscious belief that once you finally had it, then you would be worthy. But here lies the trap. That belief turns desire into survival. And survival does not attract. It repels. Keeps you spinning in the loop. You want it. You chase it. You don't get it. So you try harder. You grip tighter, and the tighter you hold, the faster it slips through your fingers. You might convince yourself you are manifesting, but beneath the surface you are panicking. Every step forward feels like a step away. Your subconscious is not creating from peace. It is reacting from fear. And fear doesn't manifest. It multiplies itself. Soon you believe you are cursed. You start blaming yourself, blaming others, blaming timing. You jump from one method to another, but the core feeling remains. Why can't I just get there? Because the truth is, you're not chasing a result. You're chasing relief from your own thoughts. And that's why every failure cuts so deep. It doesn't just feel external. It feels like proof that something inside you is broken. This is why people break down after achieving success. Why loneliness can creep in even while you are in a relationship. Why peace feels uncomfortable after years of chaos. You've mistaken urgency for meaning. How do you stop this endless chase? You don't kill desire. That is not the point. Desire is part of being human. But you do learn to listen without obeying blindly. You create space between need and action. You ask yourself, what part of me thinks I am incomplete without this? Whose voice is whispering that I must be more? Where did I learn that struggle equals value? Instead of fearing your desperation, you grow curious about it. You begin to see your patterns not as flaws, but as echoes of younger versions of you still asking to be seen. Jung said, freedom is not found in the denial of desire, but in understanding its root. Most people never stop long enough to question their fate. They live on autopilot, reacting to noise, fearing that if they stop running, they will collapse. But stopping is the beginning. When you no longer act from scarcity, you start creating from sovereignty. You walk into rooms without needing to explain yourself. You chase goals without clinging. You love without collapsing. You wait without panic. You let go and suddenly things arrive. Not because the universe suddenly rewards you, but because you finally align with what you were chasing all along. A version of yourself that no longer doubts your worth. Once you see this, obsession loses its grip. The timeline you cursed was never your enemy. It was your teacher. It taught you obsession is not clarity. It taught you pressure is not power. It taught you craving is not love. And now that you've seen the cycle, you are no longer possessed by it. You stop asking life to deliver worth, and you start becoming the one who doesn't need to bargain for it. And that is where the real freedom begins. Most people believe that once they let go, everything will magically fall into place. They imagine that clarity, love, or peace will immediately arrive. But Carl Jung would disagree. He would remind us that letting go doesn't erase discomfort. It simply changes the form of it. When the noise of striving finally quiets, another voice appears. Sometimes that voice whispers, "I don't know who I am without the chase." This is the second trap. It isn't just about craving outcomes. It's about the identity you built in the pursuit of those outcomes. You weren't only striving for a goal. You were becoming someone inside that striving. You learned how to be valuable through tension, through sacrifice, through achievement. So when the chase stops, grief sets in. Not because you lost the goal, but because you lost the version of yourself who survived by needing it. Let that truth sink in. You are grieving the death of an inner identity, the one who believed worth had to be earned, the one who thought love required effort, the one who confused pressure with value. Jung described this as ego death. And unlike the triumphant stories we like to tell, ego death rarely feels like victory. It feels like disorientation. It feels like emptiness. It feels like silence. You peel away a layer of self, and underneath isn't instant enlightenment. It is exposure. And exposure feels raw. So why do you often feel worse after letting go of what you chased? Because the pressure may have hurt, but at least it was familiar. It gave your life structure. Even if that structure was made of pain, you knew how to live inside it. You knew how to function as someone on the brink, always almost there. It occupied your mind. It gave you purpose. It made you feel useful. When that noise disappears, you are left with silence. And silence can be terrifying. You begin to see that the chase itself was a distraction. A loud, desperate distraction from a deeper ache. An ache that whispers, "I don't know how to simply exist. I don't know who I am without striving." And here's the twist. That ache is not new. It is ancient. It is the child inside you who learned that love was conditional. The child who believed peace had to be earned. The child who was told, directly or indirectly, that worth only comes after struggle. So you never learned how to live without effort. And when you stop running, all of it rushes back. The stillness, the doubt, the questions. And it feels wrong. But Jung would tell you it is not wrong. It is withdrawal. You are detoxing from a lifetime of believing you must always be on the way to something. The void you feel is not emptiness. It is space. Space to rebuild. Space to exist without proving. Space to breathe without bargaining. When you allow yourself to stay in this in-between, something remarkable happens. You begin to hear your true voice again. At first, it's faint because the old mind is still pulling you back. It whispers, "Shouldn't you be doing more? Aren't you falling behind? Won't you lose everything if you rest?" But as you sit longer in the silence, those whispers weaken, and something softer rises. This new voice does not shout in urgency. It speaks in clarity. It does not command. It asks, "What feels real right now? What are you pretending to want? What if you are already enough?" And with these questions, your nervous system begins to heal. You stop planning your life out of fear. You stop negotiating with threats that don't exist. You stop depending on others to validate your direction. Instead, you begin creating from peace, not pressure. You begin choosing from grounding, not guilt. You learn you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify your boundaries. You don't have to shrink to feel safe. This is the beginning of alignment. The version of you that emerges from this pause is not reactive. They are rooted. They don't spiral when things don't go as planned. They don't collapse when misunderstood. They don't abandon themselves at the first sign of conflict. Because their value is no longer negotiable. They have reclaimed their center. Not by achieving more, but by releasing the belief that they had to. Nietzsche once observed, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is no longer about proving worth. It is about embodying it. It starts quietly. You wake up and no longer reach for your phone like it's oxygen. You walk into a room and no longer scan for approval. You speak and you are not silently rehearsing your worth. You move slower but feel stronger. You don't chase. You choose. You don't impress. You express. You don't react. You respond. And your energy begins to shift. Not in a mystical fantasy, but in real, observable ways. People feel safer around you because you are no longer radiating urgency. Opportunities appear because you are no longer suffocating them with need. You take up the space that is truly yours, not more, not less. You no longer need permission to exist. This, Jung would say, is the return of the self. Not the false self, the mask that performed for love. But the real self, the one beneath all of it. The one who remembers. The one who never needed fixing. And in this remembering, the second truth is revealed. When you no longer identify with the one who is always chasing, you embody the one who has already arrived. You stop asking for signs from life. You realize you are the sign. You stop trying to prove your worth. You realize your being is the proof. You stop waiting to be chosen. You realize you are the chooser. And everything changes. You become whole not because the world handed you what you wanted. You become whole because you realize the wanting was never the true problem. It was the grip. And once your hands are open, you can finally receive. Not only the things you thought you needed, but the truth that nothing was ever missing. You were never too late. You were never behind. You were never broken. You were simply taught that peace must come later. Now you see that peace comes first. And from that peace, everything else aligns. You have made peace with silence. You are standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. It isn't another goal. It isn't another craving. It is a new way of being. This is the third transformation. Not just letting go, not only integration, but the quiet strength that builds when you no longer need power at all. It doesn't shout. It doesn't prove. It simply is. This is the self fully remembered. Jung didn't just theorize about the unconscious. He believed the path of every individual was to confront the shadow, dissolve the mask, and return home. Not to who they should be, but to who they already were before the world convinced them to become something else. Yet the world rewards striving. It applauds the seeker, the hustler, the one who never stops improving. So to stop chasing feels dangerous. Feels lazy. It feels like betrayal to the identity you spent years constructing. But what if all that constructing, all that fixing and upgrading, was not liberation at all? What if it was a cage? A beautiful cage. A socially accepted cage. But a cage nonetheless. A cage that whispered, stillness is failure. A cage that convinced you that without struggle, there is no growth. Jung warned of this danger, the inflation of the persona. The risk of mistaking the mask for the self. When you build a version of yourself based on admiration rather than authenticity, you become trapped. It is easy to chase goals when your worth depends on achieving them. It is easy to overwork when your safety depends on performance. It is easy to please others when your identity depends on being needed. But deep down you know none of this was ever truly you. And that is why it leaves you exhausted. So what happens when you finally stop pretending? At first, it is disorienting. You pause and realize how much of your life has been lived on autopilot. You say no and feel guilt for hours. You rest and wait for punishment. You speak your truth and brace for abandonment. Because the real you hasn't been in charge for a very long time. Now that you're letting the real voice emerge, your body doesn't yet trust it. Your nervous system still flinches. You are rebuilding an inner foundation not made of fear. You are teaching your body that calm can be safe. You are teaching your heart that love doesn't require sacrifice. You are teaching your mind that success doesn't require self-betrayal. And slowly something shifts. In this quiet space, not in the rush, not in the hype, you start to feel alive again. Not productive, not impressive, but present. You realize happiness doesn't scream. It hums. It sits with you in stillness. It shows itself in the smallest ways. The way your shoulders finally release. The way your breath deepens without effort. The way time stops feeling like an enemy. For the first time, you remember what it is to exist without editing yourself. And that is priceless. How do you live from this place, not just visit it? You start by choosing presence over performance. Again and again, you stop saying yes when your soul means no. You stop trying to prove your value to those who have already judged you. You stop abandoning your own needs just to be liked. You stop shrinking to fit into places you have outgrown. And as you repeat this, your outer life begins to reflect your inner truth. You set boundaries without apology. You choose relationships that feel like peace, not tension. You work from inspiration, not fear. You rest without guilt. You let your no carry the same weight as your yes. This is integration. This is embodiment. This is when spirituality stops being a theory and becomes your nervous system. You no longer ask, what do they want from me? Instead, you ask, what honors who I am now? You no longer chase alignment. You become alignment. And when you slip, as everyone does, you don't spiral. You notice. You pause. You recalibrate. Not because you failed, but because you are human. Every time you return to yourself, the returning becomes easier. When you stop needing life to prove your worth, you begin to live in a way that radiates it. People respond differently to your presence. Not because you are louder, but because you are real. You become a mirror. Not of their expectations, but of their forgotten truth. And it awakens something in them. They sense the depth. They sense the boundary. They sense the fire, contained, refined, warm. Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." You have moved from needing power to embodying it, from begging permission to granting it, from chasing love to radiating it. This is the third Jungian truth. When you stop trying so hard to become, you begin to remember. And the one you remember, the self beneath the roles, beneath the trauma, was never lacking. They were only waiting. Waiting for you to slow down long enough to feel them again. And now you have. Now you stand at a threshold. Not another race. Not another mountain to climb. But a way of being that no longer depends on struggle to prove its worth. The world will still tell you otherwise. It will tell you to keep running, to keep optimizing, to keep fixing yourself. It will applaud the exhausted and reward the restless. But deep down you know the truth now. The truth that none of that noise ever defined you. You are no longer chained to the idea that growth only comes through pain. When you live from this realization, you begin to carry a new kind of presence. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't beg for validation. It simply radiates, and others feel it. They sense it not in what you say, but in the calm that follows you, in the steadiness of your boundaries, in the way you no longer shrink to make room for those who cannot see you. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that is what this stage reveals. The person who no longer performs for acceptance, but embodies authenticity. So what comes next? You begin to live differently. Not dramatically at first, but in small, quiet choices. You wake up and do not feel the urgency to prove yourself. You work not to impress, but to express. You love, not with fear of abandonment, but with the freedom to stay or to walk away. You rest, not as recovery from exhaustion, but as rhythm, as part of life itself. And these shifts change everything. Your relationships become lighter. Your conversations become more honest. Your work carries a different weight, not the heaviness of duty, but the depth of meaning. You are no longer haunted by the thought of falling behind. You realize there is no race. There is only presence. Still, you will face moments of doubt. There will be days when the old urgency returns, whispering that you are not enough, that you must do more, that you must hurry. But now you see the pattern. And instead of spiraling, you pause. You breathe. You return. This is what true resilience looks like. Not perfection. Not control. But the ability to return again and again to yourself. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are. And the opposite of despair is not achieving more. It is remembering. It is returning to the person you already are beneath the masks. When you embody this, your life begins to mirror it back. Opportunities align without force. People meet you with deeper respect because you are no longer negotiating your worth. Even silence feels like companionship rather than emptiness. You discover joy not in the grand moments but in the ordinary, in the way sunlight falls across your table, in the way your body softens when you no longer rush, in the way you realize peace was never far away. And this is the final transformation. Not striving, not chasing, not proving, but simply living as the self that always was. You see now that the wanting was never about the thing itself. It was about becoming the person who no longer needs to beg life for validation. It was about realizing that peace doesn't come when the world bends to your will. Peace comes the moment you no longer require it to. Jung warned that if you do not make peace with your inner world, the outer one will continue to control you. But once you remember that the self beneath the struggle was never broken, you are free. So here is the closing truth. You will hold it the moment you stop gripping. You will see it the moment you stop searching. Because what you were chasing was never outside you. It was always this. A version of you that already carries the worth, the clarity, the love. A version of you that doesn't beg for peace. Because they are peace. And now that you have remembered, you are free.